Are you ever disappointed with the quality of your day today? Do you ever aspire to something more? Do you secretly know that you're goated even though nobody else has recognized it yet? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you might just be the person today's ice cream is named after. And by named after, I mean, why not call yourself the greatest of all time? Anyone who challenges you is just being rude, and besides, who's to say that you're not the goat of something? Like, I'm far and away the best poet, scholar, creamerist who operates out of my kitchen. It's not even close. And so, sure, maybe you don't have any competition, but that doesn't mean you're not still the best at something. So own it and celebrate your greatness with an ice cream of equal prestige. The greatest of all time. But I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even told you about it yet. So here's the deal. Once upon a time, I was gifted a book about cheese and charcuterie boards. And to be clear, I've never assembled such a board, but something about that book captures the essence of my loftiest aspirations. I mean, look at some of these pictures. I'm not advertising the book or anything, but I am saying that I want to live a life full of the spirit of these photos. Anyhow, I was flipping through it the other day and I stumbled upon a page describing a blueberry thyme and preserve, which the authors touted as a perfect pairing for goat cheese. And if there's anything that will get me excited, it's an unexpected flavor combination. I mean, blueberry, thyme, goat cheese. It wasn't even 5 seconds later that I was already scheming. Not to put together a cheese board, but to create an ice cream that was inspired by the book designed to inspire a cheese board. Because, what else would you expect? So today, set your cheese boards aside and grab a spoon because we've got ice cream to make. And strictly speaking, we really have 2 ice creams to make, a blueberry thyme ice cream and a goat cheese ice cream. And we'll start with the blueberry thyme, using Rose Levy Berenbaum's blueberry ice cream recipe as a starting point, which means beginning with a sweetened blueberry puree. She calls for 568 grams of blueberries and 250 grams of sugar. Are those the exact measures I had? I really don't think so, but the ratio is the same. Either way, make it hot, stir it around, and let it bubble until it's like a seething compote pit at Jellystone National Park. Then we'll set that puree aside and start on the ice cream. Since I'm just putting the blueberry stuff back in this pot in a few minutes, I didn't bother washing it. We could call this the blueberry ice cream equivalent of deglazing the pan. Pour 232 grams of cream and 80.5 grams of milk. That's 1 cup and 1/3 cup respectively, since I'm making half a batch, and use it to scrape up that blueberry fond. Also, toss a couple sprigs of thyme in there, because we have limited time to infuse a maximum of thyme flavor into this mix. As a side note, and in this superposition of hindsight and foreshadowing, maybe use some less thyme if you do this on your own. I think putting this much in gave it the wrong idea that maybe it was the star of the show, so keep it humble and use a light touch. After the thyme has had some time to infuse its temporal essence into the mix, we'll chunk 273 grams, or 5/6 of a cup just to irritate people, of the blueberry puree into the hot dairy. Then strain out the thyme, give it all a good blend, and let it retire to the fridge, while also noting that I reserved some additional puree to swirl into the final thing later. For fun. But then we'll move on to the goat cheese, courtesy of our other friend, David Leibovitz, which calls for, again, having 3/4 of a cup of whole milk, 1/3 of a cup of sugar, 4 ounces of goat cheese, and 3 egg yolks. Now, this recipe might sound deceptively simple, but because rural living is a whole hoot and a holler, I had to go on an epic quest to a faraway city to find a log of the goat stuff. Of course, then once I did, the recipe was pretty simple, so your experience may differ from mine a little bit. Once you have acquired your rare and prized cheese at a market that sells something other than cheddar and Colby Jack, of course no shade to those fine cheeses, crumble it into a bowl and leave it there to reflect on all the experiences that have led it to this point. Then get your milk and sugar well acquainted in a warm pot. Use those new friends to warm up some egg yolks. Mix the egg yolks back in and stir the sweet milky egg mix on low heat until it thickens. The usual egg tempering thing that we end up doing all the time here. Strain your hot bovine and galline mix over the Hersine crumbles and stir until the cheese is melted. Then, like the blueberry mix, this one gets to go in the fridge for a while. And that takes us to churning time. Now, if you are a person of questionable priorities, you may own a double-barreled ice cream machine, in which case you may simultaneously churn both pints at the same time. If not, and you have your priorities in the right place, you may need to do some strategizing. And I've frozen pints in my regular old quart-sized machine loads of times. I'd probably recommend in this case churning the cheese ice cream first, since having its remnants will be less visible in the blueberry than if you churned the blueberry first. However you do it, once the churning is over, you get to do the fun task of swirling. And by fun task of swirling, I mean putting small scoops at a time into a cold bowl, and then gently folding those small scoops over each other to create a swirled ice cream. If you swirl too much, they'll start to blend into each other too much, and that's really just a visual issue that will have only negligible gustatory ramifications. So do whatever you want. I did by adding some extra blueberry drizzle into the mix, again for fun. But that's enough of that. Package up your gently swirled ice cream and stow it in the freezer for a good hard nap. When tasting day comes around, serve yourself up a scoop and give the greatest of all time a taste. That's what I did, and here's what I have to say. First off, this is really fun. I love the idea of this ice cream, and if you're an astute listener, you may notice that I substituted the word idea in for taste. Here's the thing, it's good, which is to say that it isn't bad, but it's also maybe not exactly what you'd expect from an ice cream. Maybe it's an acquired taste. I will say that the third and fourth bites are a whole lot more pleasant than the first. It's an interesting flavor, which is to say it gives me something to think about. It's not just a surrender to the sweet pleasures of something like a Snickerdoodle. I almost hate myself for saying it, but it's kind of intellectual. And I don't know if that's necessarily a compliment for an ice cream like this, but I do think two things would help. And the first is less time. You know what they say, time is money and less is more, so less time is more money. Also, I really think that this whole situation would be helped out with some lemon. Both the blueberry and goat cheese ice cream recipes called for the optional addition of lemon, but I omitted it because I was all tuckered out from my cross-county search for goat cheese. And third, who are we really kidding? I don't think goat cheese is really my thing, so it was an uphill battle from the start. But if you do love goat cheese, I think this would be a better deal for you. But actually though, now that I'm thinking about it, this whole recipe was inspired by a book intended to create cheese boards. So maybe... I mean, it can't hurt. Okay, so I know how that must have looked, but hear me out. I think we've discovered something, and it's that putting that ice cream on a cracker with salami was actually a big mistake. But what are we here if not to make these kinds of grand discoveries? Now you know that I made a bad choice. So what have we learned today? Well, we've learned that inspiration can come from all kinds of places, that there's an infinity of possibilities out there. We learned that becoming the greatest of all time may actually require less time, and that a squeeze of lemon could go a long way. We've also learned that some ice creams offer the kind of pleasure you get listening to something like Clair de Lune, while others offer the kind of intellectual stimulation that you might get by listening to something like Pierrot Lunaire. Also, and this is pretty important, we've learned that just because you've invented an ice cream based on inspiration for a cheese board, it does not mean that that ice cream goes particularly well with salami and crackers. Although the cracker wasn't that bad. And finally, I think I've learned that what I really have a hankering for is blueberry, vanilla, and cream cheese. So really, this is all to say that this ice cream might be just for you. If you're the kind of person who uses words like barnyardy and with notes of spruce to describe food unironically, I think this would be a real gas for you. If, on the other hand, you want to escape the difficult intellectual work of the day and retire into the sweet, unchallenging embrace of ice cream, well then you may have trouble forming a long-term relationship with this, the greatest of all time. But isn't that the greatest truth of all? Maybe greatest of all timeness is really in the eye of the beholder. Blueberry, goat cheese, and thyme might exactly be your thing, but if it's not, that's okay. There are plenty of other ice creams out there in the sea. I'm confident you'll find your one and only someday, and I'm sure I will too, because there are plenty more ice cream adventures headed our way. So don't give up hope, and have a lovely time until we meet again. Or not. I mean, you could have a lovely basil or chocolate if you wanted to. I'm not the boss of you. But anyway, here we go, onward and goatward.